Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts.
If you look at a map of global cruise deployments right now, your eye naturally just gravitates toward the open ocean. But currently, the most critical choke points and the most fascinating operational shifts aren't happening at sea at all.
Right, they are happening right at the dock.
Exactly. Today, we are really looking at the evolving identity of the cruise port. We want to show you how the physical real estate of these harbors is fundamentally dictating how the cruise industry operates.
That is exactly the through line for today's briefing. We are going to unpack three very distinct factual scenarios to show you how port functionality is shifting globally.
So you're starting in Australia, right?
Yes. First, we will examine some rolling industrial action on Western Australia's Kimberley coast that's severely disrupting turnaround operations. Then, we're going to look at a completely different approach in China, where a cruise line is utilizing a massive vessel for a non-sailing, port-based staycation model.
That's a total inversion of the traditional model.
It really is. And finally, we will head over to the United Kingdom to review some newly operational shore power infrastructure that is specifically aimed at cleaning up port emissions.
So yeah, we're moving from a port where traditional access is basically breaking down to a port where stationary access is the entire business model, and then ending with how we actually power those stationary ships.
Precisely. So let's start with that breakdown of access in Western Australia, because if you are booked on a luxury expedition sailing in the region right now, you might be looking at a pretty significant operational headache.
Yeah, you really might. We're seeing rolling, protected industrial action at the Port of Broome, and the stoppages have been notified well into late August.
And the underlying mechanism driving this disruption is a labor dispute, right? Specifically involving the Maritime Union of Australia, or the MUA.
Right. This action is directly tied to enterprise agreement negotiations between the union and the Kimberley Ports Authority, known as KPA. And context is really key here. These negotiations have been grinding on for nearly a year now.
Which is a very long time for a critical regional port. According to reporting from the Broome Advertiser, what exactly is the sticking point at the bargaining table?
Well, the core grievances basically revolve around regional allowances and time off in lieu.
Okay, can you break those down a bit?
Sure. So Broome is incredibly remote. That means regional allowances are just critical financial components for the workers living there. And time off in lieu deals with how workers are compensated with future time off when they work overtime, which, happens a lot in a 247 port environment.
Right, the port never really sleeps.
Exactly. And the situation is clearly deteriorated. The MUA's Western Australia branch secretary, Will Tracy, has actually publicly characterized this current stoppage as a campaign of last resort.
Wow. Campaign of last resort. I want to break down the actual logistical footprint of this strike, just to delineate exactly what functions at the port are affected. Because officially, the Port of Broome remains open, correct?
Yes, officially it is open.
So, if a vessel needs pilotage, meaning the local experts who come aboard to navigate the ship through the harbor channel, or towage from tugboats, those essential navigation services are still available.
They are. But, that doesn't actually mean a cruise ship can function normally.
Right, because you still have to physically attach the ship to the land and then actually move things onto it.
Exactly. And that requires mooring and stevedoring. Mooring is the physical act of securing the heavy lines to the dock. And stevedoring refers to the workers who actually load and unload the vessel.
So that means baggage, food, supplies, everything a cruise ship needs to operate.
Right. And right now, the availability of those specific services is highly uncertain. Inchcape Shipping Services actually advise their customers that existing work bans are strictly in place. They explicitly prohibit overtime and shift extensions for those workers.
So even if the captain can get the ship into the harbor, there might be literally no one there to tie it up, and no one to load the provisions for the next voyage.
Which is a massive problem.
Yeah.
And the physical infrastructure affected here makes this even more complicated. The notified stoppages cover Kimberley Ports Authority Terminal 1 through August 22nd.
But the real pressure point is actually Terminal 2, right?
Yeah, Terminal 2, which is operated by the Kimberley Marine Support Base. Action is happening there from August 7th through the 22nd. And Terminal 2 is vital to the entire region's maritime logistics.
Because of the tides in Broome, correct?
Exactly. Broome is famous for having some of the most severe tidal shifts in the world. Terminal 2 was specifically engineered with a massive floating wharf and dedicated landside support areas.
So the wharf literally rises and falls with the water.
Yes. The mechanical purpose of that floating wharf is to allow vessels to berth continuously. They don't have to wait out in the ocean for the water to rise. So when services at that specific terminal are frozen by industrial action, the natural geographic constraints of that harsh tidal harbor just immediately reassert themselves.
Ships either get stuck or they can't get in at all. Let's look at who is actually caught in the crossfire of this. We are talking about several high-end expedition vessels with very specific turnaround schedules.
Right, there are three specific ships to look at here. First, you have Ponant le Jacques Cartier, which carries about 184 passengers. That was scheduled to call on August 11th before starting a 10-night run to Darwin.
Okay, and the second one?
Then there is Seabourn Pursuit. That one has capacity of 264 passengers, arriving on August 14th to end its Darwin to Broome itinerary.
Got it.
And finally, Ponant's Le Soleal, which is another 264-passenger vessel, scheduled for August 18th.
And a turnaround for vessels of that size in Broome is a heavily choreographed logistical dance. I mean, it is not just about walking off the gangway.
Not at all. Passenger movements in this town rely on very tightly scheduled transfers. Everyone disembarking has to be moved from the port itself to a designated visitor and cruise meeting point at Napier Terrace in Chinatown.
Right, so if the stevedoring is delayed, the baggage doesn't get off the ship. If the baggage is delayed, the buses to Napier Terrace run late.
Exactly. And many of these disembarking guests have onward commercial air connections departing from Broome. A localized work stoppage at the wharf cascades rapidly into hundreds of passengers missing commercial flights.
It just disrupts the broader regional travel network entirely, which really brings me to the legal framework here. I want to ask about how much power the local authorities actually have to fix this.
Yeah, that's the big question.
Under Australian workplace law, this is designated as protected industrial action. If a port authority is facing the imminent disruption of hundreds of luxury cruise passengers, what statutory recourse is actually available to them to force the port open?
The short answer is very little by design. The Fair Work Act draws a very hard line here. Well, when a union meets all the rigorous statutory requirements for industrial action during enterprise bargaining, things like conducting secret ballots and negotiating in good faith, the action becomes protected.
Okay.
And that grants the workers a degree of limited civil immunity. Now, if it were unprotected action, the regulatory body, which is the Fair Work Commission, has the authority to order an immediate halt.
But with protected action, their hands are basically tied.
Heavily tied. The Commission can only suspend or terminate it under highly specific, really extreme circumstances.
What qualifies as an extreme circumstance in this legal framework?
Usually it requires proving a direct threat to life or personal welfare, or, demonstrating that the strike threatens to cause significant damage to an important part of the broader national economy.
And delaying a few hundred expedition cruise passengers probably doesn't meet that bar.
Right. It is a logistical nightmare for the port, sure. But it rarely meets the legal threshold of crippling the national economy.
Which really explains the current, rather desperate legal maneuvering we are seeing. According to Inchcape, the Kimberley Ports Authority initially just asked the union for specific exemptions so these cruise ships could dock.
And the union declined.
Exactly. So KPA had to engage legal representation and seek an expedited hearing. They are trying to obtain a stay of the protected action specifically carved out for these affected cruise vessels.
And while that legal process grinds on, you have to develop operational contingencies. A Fair Work Commission conciliation conference is actually set for next Wednesday.
Which could shift the negotiations.
It could, but in the meantime, KPA has told Inchcape they are willing to assist with alternative operational arrangements.
What does that look like practically?
It could mean forcing these luxury vessels to operate from an anchorage out in the harbor, basically using small tender boats to ferry passengers and luggage ashore if berthing at the terminals becomes completely unviable.
Wow. It is a stark reminder of how reliant billion-dollar global cruise deployments are on very local municipal and labor frameworks. Broome shows us what happens when a port's traditional function breaks down.
Yeah, moving people onto ship.
Exactly. Which transitions us to our second story in China, because they are asking a completely different question over there. What if moving people onto a ship to sail away isn't the objective of the port at all?
Right. We are looking at a fundamentally inverted operational model here, executed by Tianjin Oriental. They have a vessel called the Dream, which is currently running a non-sailing staycation schedule in Dalian and Qingdao.
A non-sailing schedule, so it just sits there.
Exactly. To execute this strictly stationary deployment, They completely paused their regular sailing schedule from August 7th through early September.
Let's profile the hardware they're using for this because it's not a small ship. The Dream is a 77,499 gross ton ship. And just for context for the listener, gross tonnage isn't a measurement of weight, it's a measurement of enclosed interior space.
Right, so this is a massive structure.
It was built by Fincantieri back in 1998. It features 1,007 cabins, and it holds a maximum capacity of 2,417 passengers. Tianjin Oriental actually acquired it recently in 2023.
And originally, this vessel was operating a completely traditional schedule. It was slated for 30 regular sailings out of the Shanghai Wusongkou International Cruise Terminal in the first half of 2026.
But to accommodate this stationary strategy, they outright canceled a number of those Shanghai voyages through August 30th.
Yeah, the ship is essentially serving as a pop-up resort now. It will not return to its Shanghai rotation until September 3rd.
So the first phase of this program is happening right now at Dalian Port, running from August 7th to August 17th. And this is the first stationary stay of its kind at this specific port.
It's a brand new approach for them.
What I find really fascinating is the financial model here. It is completely uncoupled from how you normally price a cruise. You aren't paying a traditional all-inclusive cruise fare. It's priced strictly by the stateroom type on a per-night basis.
Yeah, it functions exactly like a land-based hotel booking. The pricing structure reflects that directly. Fares are set at 699 renminbi, which is roughly $100 per guest per night for an ocean view stateroom.
And for a balcony?
If you want a balcony suite, the rate goes up to 999 renminbi, or about $150 per guest per night.
And here is where this model genuinely bypasses the usual headaches of heavy maritime infrastructure. The logistics of embarkation are totally streamlined.
Oh, completely.
If you are participating in this Dalian staycation, you only need a national identification card to board. No passports are required at all.
Think about what that means operationally. They have basically stripped away customs, immigration, and international port clearances.
They've removed a massive layer of friction for domestic travelers who just want a short-term resort experience.
It's an incredibly efficient use of a maritime asset. Following this stay in Dalian, the Dream actually moves to Qingdao, where it will remain stationed through September 1st.
And this upcoming Qingdao deployment is actually an extension of a highly successful pilot program Tianjin Oriental ran earlier this summer, right?
Yes, let's detail that pilot. On July 17th, the Dream sailed from Shanghai, repositioning to the Qingdao International Cruise Home Port on July 20th.
Okay.
For the next 10 days, it operated a cruise beer festival staycation. This was explicitly tied to the broader Qingdao International Beer Festival happening in the city at the time.
So they utilized the same frictionless passport-free boarding process for that.
They did, but they also offered day trip passes alongside the overnight packages. They were specifically targeting regional visitors from Shandong province and local Qingdao residents who wanted the onboard experience without leaving the dock.
When the Dream returns to Qingdao next week, the focus shifts heavily back to that event-based hospitality. Tianjin Oriental is reinstating all the elements that drove that July pilot.
Right, so we're talking about deck parties, live performances, dedicated shopping events, and extensive family entertainment.
They are essentially operating the vessel as a temporary convention center and entertainment complex.
Pretty much. They will also offer premium stateroom stays, although they actually haven't published a separate fare schedule for those just yet.
This raises a major structural question about port utilization for me. How does this event-based model compare to what Qingdao's home port usually handles? Because this feels like a massive divergence from standard maritime transport.
It is a stark contrast, absolutely. And it becomes obvious when you look at Qingdao's other 2026 home port programs. Earlier this year, the port was handling totally traditional origin-to-destination operations.
Like what, specifically?
Well, in early July, the travel company, Kaisa, chartered 2 departures on the vessel Vizio, sailing from Qingdao to Korea.
Okay, a standard international sailing.
Right. And in May, the port hosted a themed sea film festival voyage utilizing the Adore Mediterranean, which was also a standard sailing deployment.
So what Tianjin Oriental is doing with the Dream is fundamentally different. They are testing the viability of utilizing heavy maritime infrastructure strictly for regional land-adjacent tourism.
Exactly.
Now, whether a vessel is stranded in port due to an industrial strike like we see in Broome, or intentionally moored as a pop-up hotel in Dalian, there is a constant operational reality here.
Power.
Exactly. These massive ships require enormous amounts of power just to keep the lights on and the water running. The environmental footprint of a stationary vessel brings us to our final story, focusing on the advancement of shore power infrastructure.
Right. We turn to the United Kingdom for this one, where Portsmouth International Port has just officially completed its first commercial cruise shore power connection.
This is a major milestone for them.
It is.
Hmm.
Virgin Voyages' Valiant Lady successfully utilized the port's newly operational system. So instead of burning fuel to run the ship's onboard auxiliary engines, the vessel drew its electricity directly from the shoreside municipal grid while it was berthed.
The timeline on this rollout has been incredibly rapid. The system underwent its final testing and achieved full operational status in July, and Portsmouth formally announced the successful commercial connection on August 5th.
And crucially, they didn't just test it with one ship. They demonstrated multi-vessel capacity immediately.
Right, because the infrastructure was designed to service both cruise ships and ferries simultaneously.
Yes. While the Valiant Lady was plugged in, Brittany Ferries the Guillaume to Normandie was connected right alongside it. That dual-vessel operation proved the working capacity of the multi-berth system.
And they plan to expand on that, don't they?
They do. Portsmouth has explicitly stated they expect this system to handle 3 simultaneous vessel connections later this year, though, they haven't announced a specific date for that milestone yet.
The financial and strategic backing for this is substantial, supported at the national level with funding from the UK Department for Transport and Innovate UK.
Interestingly, though, from a reporting standpoint, Portsmouth's August 5th announcement did not publish the overall project cost, nor did they disclose the specific electrical capacity rating of the installation.
That is interesting, but they heavily emphasize that this infrastructure is central to their strategic goal of becoming the UK's first zero-emission port by 2050.
Right.
I do want to challenge the actual emissions data here, though. The basic premise is that connecting to the city grid is inherently cleaner.
Yeah. Basically, instead of keeping your car idling in the driveway to run the air conditioning, you just plug the vehicle into the house.
Right, but what specific metrics are we actually looking at? Exactly what pollutants are reduced when a ship shuts off its auxiliary engines? And what caveats does the Environmental Protection Agency apply to these figures?
Well, when a properly equipped vessel connects to shore power, the immediate localized benefit is significant. You are stopping the emissions generated by burning marine fuel right alongside the dock.
Which pollutants specifically?
The specific targeted pollutants are nitrogen oxides, or NOx, sulfur oxides, or SOx, particulate matter, and carbon dioxide, or CO2. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has studied these systems extensively, and they report that overall pollutant reductions can reach up to 98%.
But hold on, that 98% figure has to come with some massive regulatory asterisks, right? If Portsmouth plugs a massive cruise ship into the UK grid, doesn't the environmental benefit depend entirely on how that local electricity is generated?
That is exactly the primary caveat the EPA explicitly notes, that 98% maximum reduction occurs only under favorable conditions.
Favorable conditions meaning a clean grid.
Exactly. The actual net environmental benefit depends entirely on the grid's electricity mix. If the municipal grid powering the port relies heavily on coal or fossil fuels, the emissions aren't eliminated. They're basically just displaced from the ship's smokestack to a power plant further inland.
And from an engineering standpoint, plugging in doesn't mean the ship is entirely powered down, does it?
Not at all. I mean, a cruise ship is essentially a floating city. Even when drawing electrical power from the shore, the EPA notes that boilers and certain other critical onboard systems often still need to operate continuously during a port stay.
Because you still have to generate heat and hot water for thousands of passengers.
Exactly. So those mechanical systems maintain their own baseline level of localized emissions, regardless of the shore power connection.
That really brings us to the conclusion of today's professional briefing. Across these 3 developments, we see an industry navigating a highly complex intersection of forces.
We really do.
You have fragile labor frameworks dictating port access in Australia. You have shifting deployment models in China that completely redefine the purpose of a passenger vessel. And you have the strict engineering realities of environmental compliance in the UK.
It's a lot of moving parts, all tied to the physical dock.
It is, and it leaves you with a lingering question to mull over. As port infrastructure becomes cleaner and passenger operations increasingly find revenue in stationary, passport-free Staycations, how long until a cruise line decides to build a massive resort vessel that is never actually designed to leave the dock at all?
Thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.